Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are going to continue on today looking at a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Spiderland. Juggernaut by Cave-In. Their album Until Your Heart Stops is regarded as an early landmark of metalcore. The whole band were still only teenagers when they wrote the songs and subsequently recorded the album. So let's uh let's dive into this and see what's going on with Cave-In's Juggernaut. Very compressed sounds. Very small sound sphere. Pretty typical for the sounds. Production's a bit rough as well. That's pretty fun. The flow of this song is really interesting. It feels wholly linear, but there's been a couple of callbacks already. This is like the second section. I think this is kind of meandered on a little bit too much. Yeah, lots of dissonance here. It would become a staple of the genre. Although, metalcore? Early metalcore. Okay. The breakdown. Oh man. Everything about that ending felt like it was going to keep going on, and the only reason I think it worked is because we've already solidified that when you hear the bell of that ride cymbal, the ting, we know that there is a harsh stop coming up and there's going to be a moment of pause. Otherwise, if there was any other sound there, if they hadn't already set up those expectations from a couple sections earlier, I don't think that would have worked as well as it does. But because they already had the setup, the payoff was there. It works both within the context of calling back to an idea and finishing out the track and just being a bit comedic because everything up to that point is showcasing we're going to be going somewhere else. We have a momentum from the snare, just constant snare roll. We had a couple of guitar notes. All of them had long tail offs on them, which tells us that we're going to play something next. And then it's just this really abrupt stop. Yeah, that neat little ending there. And again, you put in the work and you can pull off wild stuff like that and make it work. So the context for this is really important because I think without knowing that this was sort of proto metalcore, without knowing that this came out in 99, which I went and got that info myself, I think I would have a very different take on it because it is exceptionally rough around the edges, but that tends to be the case with these bands that are on the forefront of a musical shift. There tends to be wild experimentation, which there certainly is in here, that there isn't a template to work off of. There's no blueprint to build your ideas off of. At best, you have some foundations with what's come before you, maybe what your influences are, but you're taking them in a completely different direction. There's no roadmap. And so there's going to be rough elements to it. And that's certainly the case here. This is very experimental, especially for the time. There's neat ideas going on in here, but it's pretty equally paired with stuff that I think just doesn't work. And especially coming at it after I've listened to a bunch of, well, what would be iterative metalcore stuff that was based off of this sound but refined down over the years, collectively, hundreds, thousands of metalcore bands refining a sound and really presenting, finding what the core of it is, and showing what this sound could be with hundreds of thousands of hours of refinement. It's difficult to go back and listen to the people who are creating the art that was at the forefront of it without nostalgia, and I'm right there with there's some stuff that I've heard at the precipice of it that newer stuff just doesn't hit the same way as it does. And even though I acknowledge it's a bit rough around the edges, it works better for me, and I don't know if some of that's nostalgia or what, but coming at this without nostalgia, it's a rough song. It is. But it does a lot of really cool stuff. So let's dive into some of that. First of all, like I said, it is linear with callbacks, and that is something we so rarely see in rock and metal in general. Every section is fresh but still has one foot in the last section, and it allows everything to still have a fluidity and a flow and a cohesion to it that could be sorely missing, especially given some of the wild shifts that we go through. It's really nice that we continue to hear these concepts being brought back up or flowing from one section to the next in at least one of the instruments that allows it to have this connective tissue throughout the entire track that even when we find something it's like, whoa, I never thought they'd go here, you can still trace back how they got to that point. It wasn't a random leap, it was a calculated series of events. And I'm a big fan of that style of writing, especially the callbacks or foreshadowing, however you want to look at it. I think in this case, it's more of callbacks, but it really depends on your perspective. Do you think that they played this to set up something we're doing in the future? Or do you think they're playing this now to purposefully put you back into the mindset of where we were? It's you get a little bit into your experience with the works and possibly what you think the artist's intention are at that point. So that's why I typically just kind of put a slash between them and say them together. Callbacks and foreshadows are just sort of the same thing because really the difference is intent. But we have a few of those in here. And, we already went over the ending. The ending could not have worked without already setting that up 2 minutes prior. But there's some riffs that we call back. There's a drum bit that we call back. Um, I think there is even a rhythmic idea that shows up in the guitars later that we saw earlier, but the notes, the pitches are different. So it's more of an adaptation of an idea we already heard. But yeah, it's a lot of this work smarter, not harder. You've already written something once. Why are you going to write something new when you could reutilize it and present it in a new light? And that way you're already, a quarter of the way done. One of your instruments is already written for. Yeah. It sounds like lazy copy and paste, but it's honestly one of the best ways to make a song feel cohesive. Just take something you did, throw it in later. And the nice thing about digital audio workstations or DAWs, the software that we use nowadays is you can invert it and reverse it and flip it over and all sorts of stuff with just a couple of keys. Hear how it sounds. We can do some really cool fuguish type stuff and test it out in seconds to see how it actually works together and if anything needs tweaked. It is wonderful and it is not lazy writing in the least. It just feels lazy now because it's a couple of buttons, but it's really smart writing, and they showcase a ton of it in here. And once again, just to reiterate this, to great effect, without some of those callbacks, the song would feel exceptionally disoriented, I think. Now, in the idea of metalcore, which this certainly, I was going to say has roots in, but was setting the roots for, I guess, technically, whether they knew it or not. The guitars are all textural. There's very little riffage going on as far as melodic riffage. Everything's very texture based or sound based. We do change pitches at times, but it's not that we're moving between two specific pitches for their purpose in the key or anything theoretical like that. It's just that they needed to change the pitch, such as when we have that really low chugging sound and we go bum 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 bum, and we hit this higher note and then come back down to the lower chugging. We didn't necessarily pick that higher note for its specific pitch. It's just something quite a bit higher to contrast with our low chugging. Although I think it was an octave, which makes perfect sense because it just creates stability. So even if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to sound right. It's a possibility. Uh, they also could have been master theorists and they just wanted to write music like this and they knew exactly why they chose that note. You don't really know when you're talking about stuff like this unless you've done your research on the band themselves. But yeah, from my perspective though, none of the notes really matter. It really is the relationship to the notes and more of a vague element of that as well. We need a note that's higher. That's definitely a relationship. We're looking at an interval, but the specific interval doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we're moving to a sixth or a seventh or the octave or any of that. We just need a note higher and we'll find one that sounds good. And so that's what a lot of this track feels like to me from the guitar and even the bass perspective. Um, it's just what sounds good to my ears, and a lot of it does tend to fit a bit closer to the lower end, which is typical for what metalcore would become. Um, and it just all sounds cool and heavy. It's got this nice metal bite to it all throughout the track. The drums are consistently entertaining in that they never seem to stand still. Each idea only sticks around for like, I don't know, 2 bars, sometimes 4 bars. Even within a section that hasn't changed, the guitars, the vocals, the bass, they're all still doing the same thing, but the drummer decides to change things up. And the frequency of these change ups are so nice. It allows me to have something to latch onto a little bit after I have found the 1 bar guitar phrase to be a bit repetitive. And not to say that I'm growing bored of it, but that from an analytical mindset, I know what they're doing. I understand their placement in the song. I need something else to figure out what they're doing. My brain, when I'm in this mode, just wants to keep latching onto new puzzles. If it doesn't, then I reach a state of boredom, which is a very different quickness to boredom than a casual listen. But that's why songs that tend to move faster, I tend to have more positive outlooks on with the channel. It's not necessarily because I like them better. They're just, it puts me in a better state of mind given the type of attention I'm giving these tracks. Which is going to be interesting on Monday because we have a 90-minute song on Monday. Oh, that's going to be something. Wow. Little spoiler there, a few days early, but yeah. The production. I can't not talk about the production here. I don't want to say too much about it. It is a 99 album. This is a remaster though. I kind of expect a little bit more, but maybe the source material wasn't enough to work with. Maybe the original stems were lost. Maybe it never had stems. I don't know. Um, but it is still a rough production. The vocals are way too small. They don't have anywhere near enough presence to them. The drums are even a bit. The drums kind of fluctuate where sometimes they feel like they need a little bit of extra kick, whether that is a little bit of compression or even maybe a little bit of volume at times. But other times, aspects of them feel too loud. The guitars are and the bass are the only ones I would say are fine, but they're fine in opposition to everything else, and in that they have enough presence and room compared to the vocals and drums. But if we put them where they would traditionally be set in the EQ, would the guitars be too quiet? I don't know, but I can very clearly hear what the guitars and bass are doing throughout this track. It's really just the vocals and the drums, and the thing is, so I got used to it. So, is it really a problem? I don't know. We have been listening to a lot of higher fidelity production this week. And maybe my ears are just attuned to that larger soundscape, and this feels very claustrophobic in comparison. And maybe I just got used to it after that. I don't know, but right off the bat, everything felt muffled and muted and claustrophobic, and that never really changed. I just acclimated to the reduced fidelity of it all. So that's all I want to say on that. Like I said, there could be so many situation or elements to the situation revolving the production on this, but it doesn't feel remastered. Unless this was exactly what they wanted. Maybe it was worse than this before. I don't know. Let's see. We hit texture production, instruments, changes, callbacks. I think that was everything I wanted to touch on. Uh, just one thing before we hit the lyrics. This was really weird because I tend to conflate metalcore with bordering on melodic deathcore, or sorry, melodic death metal, and modern metallic metalcore. And so this traditional, original metalcore stuff that I don't really think of when the genre is brought up. And so it took me a moment to get into that mode. But once I did, I could start to hear a lot of the similarities here. But if there were any looks on my face, like kind of confusion near the beginning, or like trying to figure out where I sit listening to this, that was it. I was a little confused by the description, but that was all on me because I have a very bad idea of what metalcore is. That is, one, from bad information when I was younger that I'm having a real hard time shaking, and my introduction to proper metalcore being stuff that come out lately. The idea of metalcore in the 2010s and 2020s. What I think is now described as metallic metalcore for being pedantic about it. So yeah, that's what was up with any sort of confusion you might have seen on my body language there at the beginning. Lyrics. I feel a little bad using such a triumphant transition sound, only to have no idea what's going on. I can't make out a single anything. Usually I can say, I've got this idea from this line and this idea from that line, and kind of piecing things together. Maybe it's not a complete picture, but it's something. Uh, I got nothing. We got metaphor within illusion within metaphor. It is. I don't. I don't get any of it. I've looked on a couple of sites hoping that there is somebody putting their thoughts on this, and I've got nothing to even go off of that. Genius has absolutely nothing. Songmeanings.com has a couple of comments, and one comment says, I don't know what this is about, but it's so good. And like, I feel like that's the best you're going to get out of this unless you're a pretty good poetic analyzer, because I can speak good. So I'm just gonna leave it there. If anybody has thoughts on the lyrics, if they want to go look it up and try to decipher it themselves, I'm all ears. But otherwise, those are my thoughts on Caven's Juggernaut. What did you think of this track? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said, or correct me on, or give me your own perspective on? Place those thoughts down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, is a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. Alright, that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap all this up. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.